The UK is unbelievably rich, and yet everything that matters is short of money. So we're here to find out why. Welcome to Bonkers Economics. This is where we're using these 12 images you can see around me in a series called 12 Reasons Why the UK Economy is Broken. And the one we looked at last week was this one here. We started with this one, in point of fact, which is an image of the economy, of the productive part of the economy and the much larger unproductive part. And then we looked at the following week this section here, this image here, which shows the change between the productive nature of the economy in 1950 and the predominantly unproductive nature of the economy now. And then we looked at this one here, which shows the effect of that, which is the balance of trade, imports and exports, and how we're now massively in the red in relation to foreign countries and the amount we import relative to what we export. So that's where we got to, and we're now going to look at this image here to try to get some insight into why some of these things are happening. Okay, so the image here is called trading excesses, and what it shows is the amount of currency traded in the City of London actually every day. And this little tiny little box here, which is the head of the snail, if you like, that shows the amount of sterling exchange that's needed every day to manage our imports and exports, the amount of things we buy and sell. And that's, as I say, a tiny little amount there. And then this much, much larger yellow box, that's the amount of sterling that's actually being traded in the City of London. And then this enormous great pink thing on the back, the sort of shell of the snail, that is the amount of currency in total, non-sterling currency, that's being traded in the City of London. So all of this is being traded, and this really is what we need. Now, that's a pretty classic example of work which is not terribly useful in the broadest sense of the word, but it's helpful for the people who do it because it allows them to extract money from the economy. So where does that money come from? Well, fundamentally, it comes from us. It comes from our purchases. It comes from the economy. It comes from the productive parts of the economy, because there's nowhere else it can come from. And that's because nothing here is being created. It's simply a process of exchange. It's one person trying to buy dollars or pounds, whatever it might be, and then sell them for a slightly higher price. Like any sort of transaction, we buy as cheap as we can and we sell for a bit more, and we make a little profit, and we sort that profit away. And the profits are probably tiny in percentage terms, but of course, over the vast sums of money we're talking about, they add up to very large sums indeed. And of course, here we're looking at financial trading, we're looking at money trading, currency trading, but there's loads and loads of other trading activities that go on, trading in oil, trading in all sorts of other commodities, trading in anything basically which can be traded, which can be bought at a certain price and passed on at a higher price, where nothing is created except a small margin of profit. Nothing is actually moved even in these trades. The thing stays where it is, but a profit is made because there's a difference between the buying and the selling price. And as I say, we're all paying for this. We have to be, because nobody else is. That money is coming out of the economy. It's coming out in slightly higher prices for everything pretty much. So for example, we're going to be paying slightly more for our imports or for our foreign travel money or whatever, if somebody's making a profit out of the exchange process. And rather than making a little profit by just doing a little bit of foreign exchange down here, they're making a really substantial profit by doing all this foreign exchange here. So it's costing us and it's giving us nothing. And that's a serious problem, because when we calculate the size of the economy, when we talk about how big the economy is, when the government talks about economic growth, it's including all this activity in its calculation, which is completely bonkers, because it's not of any use to anybody apart from the people who are actually extracting this money. So it's not adding anything to the economy, it's just moving it around. And treating it, therefore, as economic activity, as part of growth, makes absolutely no sense at all. And yet an increasingly large amount of the UK economy is like that. More and more of what we do in the economy are financial transactions, and less is actually productive of the real wealth that we need to live and to improve our lives. And the other big problem, of course, is that all the people doing this, I mean, they're very, very clever people. They're all, extremely skilled. graduates in many cases. They're people who've got an extraordinary range of skills. It's frightening how many engineering graduates, for example, end up doing financial activities in the City of London. And all that skill, all that potential, all that productive potential is lost to the UK economy. We've not got our engineering graduates producing wonderful new engineering projects, because if they're doing this sort of thing, they can't be doing two things at once. So we're losing out enormously in terms of skills, in terms of activity that could be really useful and really productive. So that's a pretty serious issue, and it really does go to the heart of what we've been talking about, which is what's wrong with the UK economy, because we're simply not producing enough really useful stuff. We're not producing enough of what we need. And we saw that last week when we were looking at the image about imports and exports. If we import so much more than we export, then gradually we get poorer and our money is being transferred abroad and we have less and less of our own to live on. And that's just what this thing shows, because these people are not contributing to the productive economy. That requires that we import more from abroad, we make less of what we need for ourselves, and we gradually find our economy is being owned by foreigners fundamentally. That's why our water systems, our electricity systems, so much of our what once public service assets, which are now privately owned, are owned abroad. They're owned by foreigners because we've had to sell them to cover the fact that we don't do enough real work for ourselves. So this is actually quite a big issue. This sounds like, well, this is just people making money in the City of London. What's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is that it's not really productive work, and it's taking resources away and taking money away too, which is really important, from truly productive work. And the final point to say is that I know what everyone will say. Well, these people are all paying massive amounts of tax, so they're financing the health service or something of that sort. But when you think about it, that's just nonsense, because if you give people effectively, by lending them or giving them access to huge amounts of money to go trading to make a profit, and then you take away some of that in tax, well, they've still got most of it left. I mean, if the tax is a third, say, they've still got 2/3, and that's a considerable amount in real terms of the money that they've extracted. So the tax isn't really working. Okay, so they're paying that tax, but only because we've given it to them in the first place. The economy has given them this money, taken a little bit of it back, and then we say, well, where's all the money? Well, we've given it away. So that's really why the tax argument doesn't work. If you give the wealthy people in the economy vast amounts of money, effectively, or access to vast amounts of money, or the opportunity to extract vast amounts of money, and then you take a little bit of it back, or even a decent sized chunk of it back, well, then it's still gone. The rest of it's still gone. So it's not available for productive use. So that's what's going on, and that's why this image is rather important, and we'll see others of a similar nature later in the series. So thanks for watching. If you want the numbers and the detail on this, then please do go to the website, which is bonkerseconomics.net, where you can find all the information. Do please also tell your friends, tell your family, anybody you think might be interested. Please do like this video if you found it interesting, and please do subscribe if you haven't done so already. And finally, just to say, if you would like to buy postcards of these images, well, they're now available on the website at bonkerseconomics.net, and all proceeds from that will be reinvested back in the Bonkers Economics project.